Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and welcome back to my Snare Drum of the Week series. And this is episode number 2, and today we have a few of my favorite drums of all time. This is the wood Ludwig Ray McKinley snare drum. It's really a WFL drum. And I have two of them here. The later ones were called the Super Classic or the Symphonic, model 902. So basically, the late 40s all the way into the 60s, we had this particular drum with this strainer, the Super Classic strainer. Okay? This is a very old one. This is from the mid 50s, and you could see it's got the nickel over brass rims and hardware lugs. It's pretty much all original, although these snares are original here. The snares here are not original, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Now, I've done several videos on these drums because I love them so much, but I've never really shown you, I don't think, both at the same time. I use these drums constantly in the studio. In my opinion, it's one of the best recording snare drums you can buy. It's very warm. It's dark, but it's also bright. And I know that sounds really strange, but it's hard to explain. It's got a fullness to it and a woody kind of sound, but it's also got some brightness. So it's a really perfect kind of snare drum when it's mic'd. Okay. Now live, it's not that loud, so I would definitely not use this live with a loud band in an unmiked situation, unless you're doing some folk music or you're playing in a small club or a coffee shop or something. If you're playing in a big club or obviously somewhere where, or outside where you're not really heavily mic'd and you're playing with a band, this thing's going to get lost. You're going to find yourself beating the hell out of it to try to get a sound if you're playing loud backbeat music. Now, if we're playing jazz, it's a great jazz drum. It really blends well with old A's, old K's. It's got that dark kind of sound. And it's also a really good feeling drum. Now, I use this a lot when I play pops music with symphony orchestras. I played a gig with the Cleveland Orchestra last summer with Michael Feinstein. I brought this drum, and it really worked well outside. They play at Blossom, so it's an outside area. Drums weren't mic'd, but with an orchestra, you don't really play loud, and this snare drum blends really well. You can play a little bit louder, and no one's going to complain. At least no one complained to me. Okay? And I use it with the Charlotte Symphony as well sometimes when we have pops concerts. It's also a great drum to practice on. It's just got a beautiful rim shot, a beautiful tom sound. I really have nothing bad to say about it, except it's not a very loud drum. So today I'll show you the differences between these two drums and also compare it to a state-of-the-art modern Canopus Zelkova drum, which is a different beast, but that's my benchmark wood drum that's 6.5 by 14. That's the drum I go for when I need a little bit of a louder kind of sound. So incredibly well-made drum. So we'll talk about that in a minute. That drum will have its own episode. I have two of those, and each one will have its own episode. So back to these. I'll give you the little tour here. I bought this little turntable for this series so I could turn it without lifting it up. And we'll just keep doing this while I talk. So it had the old WFL badge, and I'll show you that right now. See it right here. And I'll hold it up. Get a little closer look with this other camera. And once again, the snares are original. Now, the snare mechanism was tricky because it was this old rubberized, the ends are rubberized. And I kept the original snares on this. Normally, these snares don't last that long, so I normally replace them. But I did have a few old ones, so I stuck this back on here for this video so you could hear the drum exactly how it was, made, except for the heads. Now, on this particular snare drum, unlike most of my snares, on the resonant head, in other words, the head with the snares on it, I use an ambassador snare head. A lot of times I use a diplomat, but for these drums, through much experimentation, I found out that the ambassador snare head works better. Now, the shell construction is the classic mahogany. Okay, they called it African mahogany back then. I'm sure that's what it was. And then it's got these maple rings, which are great. Now, it doesn't have the poplar or anything like that that I know of in the middle, but it's I believe it's a 3-ply shell with the maple rings, okay? The later ones would have been painted white and were probably the poplar shells, and they would just call that the Symphonic. All right, and if I didn't mention, this is the 902. This would have been the 902P, I believe. I have a little catalog over here. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so 902P, and the other one would have been 902L, which was a wood finish that was lacquered. Okay. Now, later on, they did not offer this with nickel. That stopped, I believe, by 1961. Now, you collectors, correct me if I'm wrong. This is how I learn things. But I've never seen a catalog that had the nickel option later than 1960. Okay. This particular drum is a later drum. I believe this drum is probably 62 or 63, but I'm not positive about it. And same shell. Now this, I changed the snares out. I put these Fat Cat snares on here so I could adjust them. And as I was saying earlier, the snare is tricky because you got to screw it into the strainer. All right, and that doesn't always hold up over time. This one has. By the way, this is a great strainer, really is, but it can get damaged very easily. This handle can break off. The snares, like I said, can have some problems, and it doesn't go off all the way. This one, I did a separate video on how I modded this, and you could look for that. I'll reference it in the description to this video on YouTube, how you can modify this with 2 little metal plates to get these to float, and it works really, really well. Now, as far as mufflers go, this drum, the later one, had a muffler. I don't believe the Ray McKinley drum, it didn't. It did not have a muffler. That's how you know, okay? So there's no muffler in the really old ones, the ones they call the Ray McKinley drums. And the Symphonic drums, or the Super Classic, did have the round muffler, which I never use. Now, sometimes there's some writing in the shells for the dates, but this one doesn't have it. I also have 2 5.5 Ludwig Super Classics, which I'll show you in another video. 2 of my favorite drums as well, and one of them does have a date that's in the 60s. So today I'll play these for you, like I said. See if there's anything else. Pretty much it. Again, this will go in the playlist for these drums. These drums are so great, they have their own playlist on my channel. All right, top heads are ambassadors. You see how used that one is because I play it all the time. It's about time to switch it out. This one I switched out maybe about a month ago, okay? And we'll show you the inside of this because it's super easy to see. The workmanship was really, really nice on these. The bearing edges were cut really well. A lot of times on the Ludwig drums, they look really uneven, and you could fix that yourself by putting it on a giant piece of sandpaper, doing that, and then cutting the edges again, you know, maybe with a router. I've done that on a few drums, but I'm not messing with these because they sound so great. So we'll keep the cameras on, and I'll move this table. Now, once again, the snare drum stands I'm using, because I know a lot of you ask about things like this. These are the Pearl 1000s. It's an orchestral snare drum stand. I like it because it's very easy to adjust. It's got the big rubber grommets. It's a great stand. So, you know, I switch between matched and traditional a lot. I'll play mostly traditional today, and it's very easy to tilt, okay? And we'll put these right next to each other so you can see the fade on them. And let's lower this just a little. All right, so you can see how these drums will fade. It's a marine white pearl, okay, and very common finish back in those days, still is. And that was the finish of my first drum set, by the way. And you can see how it fades over time when, light hits it. That's common. I like it. It makes it look really attractive, I think. So if you don't want a drum to fade, you can keep it in a case and wrap it in a cloth. It won't fade. It's light that does it. So I'll play both of these drums first on time. We'll check the tuning because I'm not sure about the tuning here. So let's see. So this one's a little lower, I think. Yeah. So normally my tuning range is about a G to an A flat. Normally not that high. This sounds to me about like an A flat, maybe a G. Excuse me. I like to crank these drums up. You can do that with these and they still sound pretty full. So there's a little bit of a tuning difference. I don't have a drum key handy, unfortunately, right now, but we'll go with it. This one's probably a half step lower. All right, so we'll play this one first. And let me cover this with this thing to get rid of those sympathetic vibrations. So you hear that kind of beautiful ring. And one thing I've noticed of playing many, many of these drums over the years, I've had some, I've sold some. These two were my favorite ones, so I always kept these two. But the ring and the way the drums sound is very different, almost like sort of a violin maybe, where the wood edge ages a certain way, and the drums have a different character. They all do. Now I'll play this one the same way. And we'll play it with the snares off. Losing my voice, sorry. So we'll play both with the snares off. Now let's let you hear them muffled. So we'll put this little muffling on here. And these are just pieces of leather, and that's just a binder clip, so nothing fancy here. So we'll put the snares back on. Now you can tighten the snare mechanism pretty tight, but after a while the drum will choke. And we'll tighten this one up too. I prefer the drums unmuffled, almost always. They don't need to be muffled. So I don't use any internal muffling. This one doesn't have one, but you don't want to use it, I think. They sound best wide open. Great rim shots on these drums. Okay, so I think I covered everything here, and what we're going to do now, we're going to take them over to the drum set and play them. But before we do that, as promised, I'm going to put this Zelkova up here. So like I said, this drum will have its own movie, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Canopus Zelkova, made, really carved from one piece of wood. It's not steam bent or anything. It's actually a log that they hollow out. And no muffling, no muffler, and this is a loud drum, very bright. Let's see where it's tuned. Normally I'll tune this drum a little lower for sessions. And actually I am seeing a drum key. I'm going to grab it real quick. We'll tune it up, just in all fairness, within a half step like these other ones were basically. Now the Zelkova is a very heavy drum, okay? So it's got a lot of weight to the shell. This is the original head, actually. I've not changed it because it sounds so good. I use this drum a lot for recording rock, just much heavier music. The bearing edges, I don't know if you can see them, but they're razor sharp. Die-cast hoops, very heavy. But a lot of times I much prefer the sound of this old WFL drum. Okay, that's just me. But I love the way these old drums sound. And I'll play them both a little more so you can hear. And one thing about this deep Zelkova is you really don't want to tune it too high. If you want a higher sound, get the 5-inch Zelkova. I have that. That is one of my all-time favorite drums as well. All these drums have 8 lugs, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So this is a little tuned a little deeper. So that's the Zelkova. We'll play all of them on the drum set here for you in a minute. All right, so here we are at the kit once again. It's this old Ludwig kit. I won't have this set up much longer, but figured I'd play these old Ludwig drums with this old Ludwig kit. Old A Zildjians from the 1950s, hi-hats, everything. Everything's old, including me. So I'll play this, just some different styles for you, and we'll see how it sounds. So hopefully right away you hear the character of it, the warmness of it. Even though I'm playing pretty hard, doing a lot of rim shots, it does have a great cross rim sound. It's very warm. And with the snares off, let's see here. Now, the only thing I'll say that I don't like about the drum sometimes is the strainer, when you have the snares tight, can be a little bit difficult to turn on and off. She just had that problem. I don't know why. Sometimes it just sticks. So what I suggest is just taking a couple drops of 3-in-1 oil, not WD-40, 3-in-1 oil, and put them in that little slot right above the where the rod is. okay, the on and off rod. And that will help. And this one needs it. It just gets kind of, you know, almost corroded in there. Dirt gets in there. So that's the only thing about it. Other than that, it's a perfect wood drum, in my opinion. So let's put the other one on, and you'll hear the difference now. Like I said, I tuned the other ones earlier a little bit different so you can hear the high and the low sound of them. And we'll muffle this one, but normally 99% of the time I do never muffle this drum. But we'll muffle this one in a minute so you can hear it. All right, so this will be the older drum right here. And we'll loosen the snares a bit. To me, whenever I play this drum, it forces me into this kind of real rolly style because it's so low and loose. Just sloppy. It's a sloppy drum. Love it. Okay, and with the snares off. So that's the William, or I said William F. Ludwig, I should just say that, WFL, the Ray McKinley Snare. He was a big band drummer, so back then, You know, there's no amplification, no bass amps, no guitar amps if there was guitar. Everything was live. The bass players had to play incredibly loud with really high action. If you listen to Jimmy Blanton, the great bass player, just pulling those strings, getting that volume. And then amps were created, and then all the instruments changed. But this drum is made for that era. You know, so you can play it really hard. I'm making an effort now. Normally I don't play this hard, but I'm showing you that the drum can be played hard, but it's not really annoying or loud, as this Zelkova will be in a minute. Now, just so you know what it sounds like, I will play it muffled for you now, because I know some of you will ask. And we'll do something simple here. So I did some rim shots there and just regular in the center of the head, and that's what it sounds like muffled, okay? If you close mic it muffled, it's actually very fat sounding, big sounding. And then finally we'll put the Zelkova up here. Now remember, the Zelkova's got an old head on it, which I need to change. It's taken a ton of abuse. Oh, wrong side, sorry. Okay. Now the Zelkova, normally I will muffle that. Before, when I played it for you, I didn't have it muffled, and normally it doesn't sound great when it's not muffled. It needs to be muffled because the shell is so hard. It's almost like a metal drum. The wood is so hard, and the way the edges are shaped so sharp there, it can be abrasive sounding. So this drum was built to be compressed. Those other drums, they have compression built into them. This drum needs some compression. I'd say a 3-to-1 ratio with a very fast attack and a long release, those of you who work with compressors. That's normally what I'll use. I'll use a Empirical Labs Distressor, which is a very nice compressor when I do rock sessions with this drum, and there's a setting on there called Nuke, which basically every time you touch the drum, it's the same volume, no matter how loud you hit it. I don't always use that, but on this drum, that setting sounds incredible. And it makes everything just pop in the mix, okay? So it's a really loud drum. It's not a sensitive drum as far as playing it in a jazz style. It's one of those drums that doesn't sound great when you play it kind of right on top of it. When you get away from it or close mic it, I'm not close micing here. These mics are high up. When you close mic it, it sounds great. Even with a Shure SM57. That's not normally what I use on snare drum. Actually, I normally use a omnidirectional mic on snare drum, and I baffle it on either side. And Earthworks is what I use. And then I baffle it so it can't go all over the place, and then I'll compress the hell out of it. So that's one of my little secrets. You can get a really big sound out of it that way. And then a lot of my snare sound I get from my overheads as well. But that Omni, you're not getting the proximity effect. so it doesn't sound too bassy, because the Omni doesn't give you that. The cardioid patterns will give you that proximity effect. Okay, so we'll muffle this now and just play a little with it. All right, so that's the Zelkova in comparison with those other two. To me, there's kind of no comparison as far as character, but if you want a really loud recording drum that you don't really have to worry about and you can process it and compress it, that's your guy, okay? So we'll stick this back up here because I miss playing on it already. And we'll play a little, and I'm still deciding on what the next one will be, but it'll definitely be a Gretsch drum, okay? Because I have a lot of those snare drums. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.